Okay. So now I'm recording it in two different through two different ways. I'm going to, and I'm still recording. Okay, great. This evening we're going to be unpacking the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. And if you're listening at home, you might want to pull it up on your screen so you can follow. But I'm going to be sharing some of the text with you as well. Okay, so yes, Elizabeth, absolutely. And then all of the other disasters get conflated into one. So it's not just when you said the destruction of the temple, it's the first temple and the second temple. Then, of course, the expulsion from Spain, and other dates as well. And the text that we read, of course, is Jeremiah and Lamentations. And Lamentations has a lot to do with, he's basically pointing out, how far we have separated ourselves from the divine will, right? And which, of course, is referred to as sin. And we're going to be looking at the different things, for the most part, as we begin, of the first temple and the second temple, what was given credit, I use that term lightly, for the destruction of those two things. Okay, so without further ado, let us jump right in here. Okay. So this is this is all from the Talmud and from different places. So what I gave you is from Masechet Gittin, but I'm starting here with due to what reason was the first temple destroyed? And the answer that's given, it was destroyed due to the fact that there were three matters that existed in the first temple days: idol worship, forbidden sexual relations, and bloodshed. So those three things are noted here as the three reasons for the destruction of the first temple. And of course, I see it, Dan, just one second, is underlying this whole thing is that we brought it on ourselves, that God's wrath gets raised to the nth degree. If ever it went past that, we would be utterly wiped out. But God's anger only lasts for, what is it, 1/66th of a second, 1/80th of a second? I forget what it is. I should know that. But because I didn't study it 100 times, I don't remember it. Okay, so these are the three reasons that are given for the destruction of the second temple, of the first temple. Dan?
Yeah, question the bloodshed business. What does that refer to? I mean, that's not military. That's person to person, just mayhem. What does that actually refer to? I've never
Yeah,
seen
I
it.
don't know. It's a good question. I don't know.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, I'm gonna read something to you that I'm not going to screen share it, but you have in the text from Gittin 55b that I also don't know. So here it says, apropos the war that led to the destruction of the second temple, so that's the war with the Romans, the Gemara examines several aspects of the destruction of that temple in greater detail. And then it goes into a line from Proverbs, and then it says, Jerusalem was destroyed on account of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, which brings us to the story that we're going to be delving into. Hi, Rachel, welcome. The story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, but the thing that I want to refer to that I don't know what it's all about, and I was unable to find anything, the place known as the King's Mountain was destroyed on account of a rooster and a hen. And the city of Beitar was destroyed on account of a shaft from a chariot. I don't know what those refer to, especially the part about the rooster and a hen. I suspect that this is metaphor, which of course we have to read into whenever we're reading Agadah, stories from the Talmud. And while I'm on that topic, here's a wonderful quote that I found this week that I've always lived by, but I've never heard it put this way. Stories are not so much about what happened, but about what always happens. Stories are not so much about what happened, but about what always happens. All right? Does that make sense? So you're shaking your head no, Dan. Do you really mean that? Yes. So what that reminds me of is sometimes if after a performance, Renee and I do for a family audience, the child would come up and say, was that a true story? Like a folk tale. And our answer was always, well, it might not be, it might have actually happened, but it's a true story, right? So in the same way, I think that Torah is happening in real time, all right? This is what that line means to me. So now I'm going on to, if you're following along in the Talmud, to where I am right now, and I'm going to screen share with you. Okay, so that it says, however, considering that the people during the Second Temple period were engaged in Torah study, observance of mitzvot, and acts of kindness, and that they did not perform the sinful acts that were performed in the First Temple, why was the Second Temple destroyed? And the answer that is given is that it was destroyed due to the fact that there was wanton hatred during that period. In Hebrew, sinat chinam, right? Sinat chinam. This comes to teach you that the sin of wanton hatred is equivalent to the 3 severe transgressions of idol worship, forbidden sexual relations, and bloodshed. Because if that equation was not true, then why indeed would the Second Temple be destroyed? The First Temple was already destroyed for those first 3 things, and so sinat chinam, wanton hatred, must equal those 3. That's in the imagination and the minds of the rabbis putting all these things together. Sometimes we can guess perhaps that things are polemical, but we don't have to worry about that right now. Any comments or questions? We haven't gotten to the story yet. Yeah, go ahead, Bina.
No, I'm fascinated by the use of the word wanton, because wanton is so much about uncontrolled, kind of crazy anger, that has no justification.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and maybe you can be helpful here, Rachel. The sense of sinat chinam is hate that is kind of like rippling up and bubbling into everything, into every part of life.
Sounds familiar.
Well, yes, which is why I said that there's going to be a lot that's going to kind of like ruminate. That's not the word I'm looking for, but that's going to apply to current events. What's the word I'm looking for?
Illuminate.
It wasn't illuminate.
Oh.
Resonate.
Resonate, maybe. Yeah. Okay. Devorah wins for now. Yeah, Dan.
I have a question. So, it's not actions or behavior. It's hate. Meaning, so this is. Yeah, it's not that people did bad things.
No, it is. It is absolutely. It is the inability to work things out, between that then leads to the actions. So absolutely, and we're going to in the story that we're about to unpack. We're going to see how the slippery slope. How one thing can lead to another, even when it doesn't seem like a big deal at the time. What doesn't seem like a big deal to you, Dan, might be a big deal to me. Or stay tuned. Anybody else? Okay, here we go. So in looking at that, is anybody following along in the actual text, the Mishnah and the Gemara? Okay, Devorah is, and Mary Rita are. Okay, so here the Gemara explains that Jerusalem was destroyed on account of Kamtza and Bar Kamtza. Wait a second, where did this come from all of a sudden, right? Didn't we just learn that the Second Temple was destroyed because of Sinat Chinam? Well, in the same way that those three sinful acts, right, of idol worship and bloodshed and forbidden sexual relations equaled sinat chinam, wanton hatred, we're now going to assume this is what the rabbis are thinking, that let me tell you a story. And this story is going to be equivalent to the things we've already mentioned, right? And so here now we're going to get into the meat of the story. There is, as there was, is that what it says? Well, there was a certain man whose friend was named Kamtza, okay, and whose enemy was named Bar Kamtza. All right, let's make sure we got that, because this is going to be important. There's a certain man. Now, this man is not named, all right? By the way, does anybody remember what the unnamed man is given in the book of Ruth, who does not redeem Ruth? That man is also not named, except for that the text calls him Ploni Almoni, which is kind of like saying John Doe, right? Right, Rachel. So there was a certain man, unnamed, whose friend was named Kamtza and whose enemy was named Bar Kamtza. What can anyone tell me about the similarities and something that you're wondering about when you look at those two names? Is there a question that immediately rises in your mind? Elizabeth?
Yes, was Bar Kamsa son of Kamsa?
Yeah, that's the question. Stay tuned. Although I can give it away now, we're not going to find out. But that very well could, if we now just put that question in the backs of our minds, that'll make the story even more interesting, right? That the friend of the host, right, we're about to see, his name is Kamtza, and he couldn't stand Kamtza's son. But that's nowhere that's going to be established. So I'm not saying that that's what's happening, but it could spice the story up a little bit. Alrighty. So who's he? Ploni Almoni. He's the certain man. He made a large feast and said to his servant, "Go bring me my friend Kamtza." Alrighty. Okay, so I guess he's going to go and he's going to deliver an invitation with an RSVP and probably tell him what you should be wearing, what time the thing starts, an informal wear. The servant went and mistakenly brought him his enemy, Bar Kamtza. Okay? Kamtza's invited. Bar Kamtza comes to the feast. Ooh, I wonder who G is. Maybe it's Gail. Who else do we have for the G? Alrighty. Continuing. The man, unnamed, who was hosting the feast, came and found Bar Kamtza sitting at the feast. All right? Bar Kamtza receives the invitation. Ooh! It's a meal. I wonder what they're going to be serving. Whenever I used to come home from a gig, Renee would say, "What they feed you?" There was one weekend we had like 5 gigs, and Renee was on 3 of them. Every single gig they served us salmon. I couldn't look at salmon for a month. So I'm sorry to say we don't know what was served, but he's sitting at the feast, and the host, still unnamed, says to Bar Kamtza, "That man is the enemy of that man. That is, you are my enemy." The language here is a little problematic because it's hard to get a grasp on who is he and he is she and what, who is speaking and who are they referring to. But we have to assume that the host is saying, what the are you doing here? You were not invited. I hate you. And out loud is thinking to himself and says to him, right? I invited Kamsa. I didn't invite you. Well, he replies, meaning Bar Kamsa replies, what then do you want here? And the host replies, get your ass off your chair and get out of here. Arise and leave. Alrighty. Now you have to picture what's going on. It's a feast. There are a lot of people there, right? Bar Kamsa, not expecting invitation, must have been delighted to be invited. Or, and I'm just jamming here, maybe he thought, oh, I know this guy, he's friends with Kamsa. Maybe he's trying to make, peace here, between us. And so he comes to the party, not knowing, hi Gail, you were G. Not knowing what's going on, but then he sits down and he's told to get up. And so he tries to kind of put a tamper on the situation. Bar Kamsa says to the host, listen, I'm already here. Since I've already come, let me stay. And he's probably saying it sotto voce, right? He doesn't want to make a big deal of it. Let me stay, and I'll give you money and whatever I eat and drink. I'll pay you for it. Kind of magnanimous of him, right? He's trying to make nice. He doesn't want to cause a scene, and yet a scene is like brewing here. And he finally says, just do not embarrass me by sending me out, right? Maybe we can even hear the word, please do not embarrass me by sending me out. Now, maybe by this time, all eyes are on the host, kicking Bar Kamsa out. And so this is not happening, in the corner of the room, sight unseen from everybody else. Everybody knows everybody. They're probably wondering too, what is he doing here? Or at the very least, they see what's going on and probably hear what's going on too. What happens next? The host says to him, no. Doesn't even acknowledge the offer. You must leave. And Bar Kamsa says to him, he ups the ante. I'll give you money for half the feast. Just don't send me away. Right? Things are ratcheting up here. All right? Now more and more eyes are turning, ears are glued. Get out. Get out, get out. This is a mistake. You're not supposed to be here. This is not a good situation. Bar Kamsa then ups the ante to the nth degree. I'll give you money for the entire feast. Just let me stay. No, you must leave. And finally, the host took Bar Kamsa by his hand. Are you picturing this? Stood him up and took him out. Now, I'm not going to go to the next line here because I want to stop for a second. So, Bar Kamsa is, as we've been saying all along, begging the host not to embarrass him. Everyone's aware, everybody's watching, everybody's going to see that I've been rejected here. And we can only imagine that the host bodily, because it says, right? I'm going to, by his hand, that's why I underlined it to remind me, takes his hand, stands him up, and took him out. Like, I'm picturing, this is not a very gentlemanly manner in which this is all happening. Maybe there is dialogue that's still going on. And people are watching. I'm going to stop here for a moment. What is being aroused with you? What's your reaction to things so far? And you might be wondering, what the heck does this have to do with Tisha B'Av? Yeah, Susan.
I'm wondering why the Bar Kamtza was his enemy. What was the story behind it? How did
So,
he
yeah.
get to that feeling that he's his enemy?
Yeah. This is a story that we don't know, but that's playing in the background. And now, obviously, it's playing in the foreground. And it must be something really intense for this to be the only solution to a very difficult situation. Bina.
I feel like it's also about shaming people. And God hates that when we do that. We hate it too. It's awful.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yes. And in our text, it says many things about shaming, but shaming is equal to death. It says that, and also that a loss of one's reputation is like killing a person, because that you can't undo.
And it's like telling God what you made isn't perfect and holy.
Yeah, that also is always playing in the background. Yeah, Moish.
Do we know whether Bar Kamsa knew Kamsa?
We do not have that information. In the same way that we don't know whether Bar Kamsa is Kamsa's son and they cut the taiki without him. Everybody know what I'm referring to? There was some kind of a family, dispute, maybe, but we just don't know. Yeah, Rachel. Rachel, did you want to say something?
Unmute.
Oh,
You have to unmute.
I'll get you.
Because in Judaism, Kabbalat Orchim, it doesn't matter what the person did to you. If they come to your house, you let him be there and serve him and all that, and then it just just like the Bedouin, because that's what we do. The Bedouin do the same thing. Even if you're their enemy, when you come to the place, they take care of you, and then 3 days later they run after you and do whatever they want. But this is really, really nasty.
Really nasty.
Yeah, really
Thank
nasty.
you. I think that is exactly what it is. And welcome, Phyllis, otherwise known as Shosh. Now the cast is complete in New Jersey. All right, Moshe, you're going to have to catch Phyllis up. Dan.
So just a quick question. So everybody who's watching this, who is supposedly a friend of John Doe, what do they have to say about it?
You are, that's a great transition, a great question to transition to the next part of the story. Okay, so here it says, at the bottom of that page, after having been cast out from the feast, Bar Kamsa said to him, oh wait, actually, hold on a second. I want to sneak a peek of what's next. Yes, okay. All right, he's having cast out of the seat, Bar Kamsa said to himself, but we're not going to get to that right yet. Because Bar Kamsa thinks to himself, I put that in parentheses. But if in the text it says, since the sages were sitting there, so who does this tell us was invited to this feast? There were mucky mucks, right? Included in are the rabbis, quote unquote, right? Some of whom are, Kohanim, Leviim, Israelim. We don't know, but we do know that the sages were sitting there and did not protest the actions of the host. Although they saw how he humiliated me, learn from it that they were content with what he did. So, here I don't want to say it. What do we have? Exactly what you were just saying, Dan. What do we have? What is now the situation? The plot thickens because now there's commentary about those who are there and do nothing. So what might that be equivalent to in our times? What?
Well, it might be that this guy was the enemy of everybody and the enemy of the whole community, and they all kind of agreed this guy has no place in civil society, and the host should kick him out.
I never thought about that as a possibility. Absolutely could be a possibility that this person, although it would be hard to believe that Bar Kamsa would have accepted the invitation, even though it was misdelivered, and gone to something in which he knew he wasn't welcome, right? Because everybody who hates him is going to be there if it's everybody who hates him. So I'm just being devil's advocate here. But yeah, absolutely. I never thought about that. Devorah? You have your hand up?
I was thinking that perhaps people are thinking, well, I don't really know what this is about, so I can't change anything. Like, they're dealing with it the way they see they have to do it, and it's not my business.
But
None of my business.
right.
None of my business, right? Nothing's happened, like in New York City, nothing's happened here, folks. Just be on your way. Yeah, Rachel?
Which is the worst when somebody does some bad thing to somebody else and it's none of my business. It's very upsetting. It is your business.
Yes, absolutely. Which underscores, I think, what is the question at this moment is are the bystanders, were no mere bystanders, the sages, are they even more culpable than the perpetrator, meaning the host who lifts them up by the hand and escorts them out? Maybe violently, we don't know. But certainly shaming him. So who is the victim here? Who is the perpetrator? I made a note here that that the rabbis, the sages, they don't protest.
Right.
There's silent affirmation. All right. So they must be going by not saying anything, they're going along with it. It must be okay. And that puts the stamp of approval on the whole terrible situation.
It just
Right. Go ahead.
it's just like in Germany, nobody said anything, and look what happened.
Right.
So it starts little, but then it grows.
Yeah. It got me to thinking when I was studying this, if there have been times in my life where there's been like call it a minor injustice that I witnessed, but I didn't say anything. Sometimes I'm sure earlier in my life, somebody would make, a joke, maybe about Jews or whatever. And today I would call somebody on it. But all those small things, and certainly, if you're black, you live with this 24/7, right? And the accumulation of all this leads to a tremendous amount of pain and anger, which is, we'll see now where it's going to lead to. But something else I wanted to, the possibility here, there's a couple possibilities that this story arises from the rabbis wanting to teach themselves a lesson. That's always a possibility. That they create this story as a what's that called? A story to watch out, a something tale, a cautionary tale, right? Isn't that great? Where you actually sometimes you're looking for a phrase and it comes. Wonder of wonders. A cautionary tale. So that is a possibility, right? But what we're looking here at, definitely looking at, I think, is that the sages, many of whom are from the priestly sect, right, had the power to do something because they're present there, and they did nothing, right? So they are not using the power and influence that they have to assuage the situation in some way. Yeah, Susan and then Devorah.
What were they afraid of, I wonder? Because it was fear that probably stopped that.
Yeah, great question, and we're going to actually find out. Maybe not that's the exact answer, but I think that you're giving us a little flavor of what's about of decisions that are about to happen. Devorah, did you have something too?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, how much impact does it have on them that they're in somebody's house? They're not in their place of study or their homes. They're in someone else's home. And are they afraid to cross lines or make enemies, or there's something going on?
Yeah, great. Now let's check this out. Okay, who's Moshe? Hold on to that, Susan. Hold on to that because that's coming up, and exactly what you said, Devorah, is in the very next slide.
When you say power to stop it, that reminds me of the police when there is, one policeman beating up a person and the other police don't try to stop them and don't give aid, and they're just starting now to get their own trouble.
Yeah, and you hear testimonies from police who will later on say, "I knew I should have done something, but at the time, but I didn't know what to do." Maybe a junior policeman, whatever. So now we have some commentary on this text in Talmud. Right? One can say that, or when we say that they did not protest, meaning the sages, because they did not have it in their power to do so, or even if they did. It's possible that they did not protest because of false flattery that overcame that generation. For example, they preferred to flatter the host with nice lies rather than speak up and tell the truth. Right? Right? Rather than, what's the story? The king who had no clothes? The emperor who had no clothes? Right? Instead of calling truth to power, they do nothing. And perhaps this is true too, which is, they're at a party. I don't know if it's somebody's house or at a catering hall, and they're having a great time. They're drinking. Oh, this is happening. Come on, just go away. Dan.
Well, Susan was first, I think, wasn't she? Well,
I think Susan had she spoke before. Yeah, go ahead, Dan. But thank you for your chivalry.
it makes you wonder whether everything is the opposite here, that this so-called enemy was the real good guy. And he was hated because these guys were all jerks or criminals or some sort of conspiracy cabal, and he was the one that was the honest guy. And so you flip it as to who's the good guy and the bad guy and all this, and that the fact that they didn't protest was the fact that they were all together with John Doe and were in his pocket, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a great observation. And although we're going to find out that it doesn't play out that way in this story, I think that was definitely food for thought and something that happens, right? It's
In
certainly
Trek,
some.
it does. In Star Trek, it does. There are a couple
Oh,
of
great. We'll talk about that offline. All righty. So now we're back to the text. This is Bar Kamtza talking to himself. Remember, this is happening. He's just tossed out, and he says, and he said that, those people could have done something. They did nothing. I will therefore go and inform against them to the king. Ooh la la. He went and said to the emperor. So what's he saying? He said, well, I'm going to rat them out, right? And for better or worse, he's going to be an informant. He's going to bring they're going to bring them down, right? They think, those people are woke. They need to be woke up to how bad they are. They did this to me. I'm going to do this to them. He went and said to the emperor, okay, so I'm going to just pause here for a moment to underscore the fact that this never happened. This is a made-up story. A Yid, an ordinary Jew, just doesn't go to the emperor, right? But it makes for a good story. He went and said to the emperor, the Jews have rebelled against you. And the emperor says, who says that this is the case? And Bar Kamtza says to the emperor, go and test them. So he must have been concocting a plot against them the whole time. He takes an Uber to the castle, whatever. And he says, send them an offering to be brought in honor of the government and see whether they will sacrifice. Okay. So the emperor went and sent with him a choice 3-year-old calf. Going to stop here because you probably have a question about this. The emperor, Bar Kamtza says, send a sacrifice. And the emperor says, goes and sends with Bar Kamtza a 3-year-old calf. You have any questions about this? Yeah, Mary Rita. I know what you're going to say, I hope.
Well, isn't the emperor like a Roman? And how would he know what he was supposed to send?
Oh, and I'm going to add to that. Wait a second. I thought only Jews brought stuff to the temple for sacrifices. Not so. Not so. The Romans did with an emissary, and non-Jews could bring things as well to the temple for sacrifice. They might have. So not only Jews brought sacrifices to the temple. Interesting bit of history. Bina, what a face.
Yeah, I don't understand. Yeah, I know I do this when I really don't understand something. So is Bar Kamtza not Jewish?
Oh, I'm assuming he is Jewish.
Yeah, he's Jewish.
So it's very
He's
interesting that he says, go to the king and tell them the Jews have
Yeah.
rebelled against you.
Yeah,
Wow.
he's informed. He's so pissed off. He'll do anything to get back at these guys. And what do I mean by anything? He knows what's going on in Jerusalem at this time. Think about it. He's willing to bring down the entire nation of Israel
Wow.
because of being shamed at that party.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah? Pretty heavy. Devorah.
Well, since we don't know how much of this is true, how true is it that other than Jews could bring sacrifices?
We know that. We know that. It's yeah, we know that. Don't ask me how we know it, but we do.
It is known. It is known.
And I'm not making that up. Okay.
Well, now we all know it.
Well, we all know.
All right. So I want to get to the next part. So hold on a second. So what's going on here? Bar Kamsa has the calf. It's a 3-year-old calf. Bar Kamsa is bringing the sacrifice to the temple on behalf of the emperor, right? You with us? Here we go. While Bar Kamsa was coming with the calf to the temple, he made a blemish on the calf's upper lip. Some say, that's great, it's like a Jewish joke. And some say he made the blemish on its eyelids, a place where, according to us, meaning halacha, it's a blemish. But according to them, meaning the Gentile rules for their offerings, it is not a blemish. So now we're getting a little bit more insight into what goes on in Jerusalem and elsewhere during these times, that the Romans brought sacrifices, but not necessarily to the temple, and certainly not to the temple with its priests who were going to be offering the sacrifices. Why? Because the priests you wouldn't bring a calf with a blemish. Bar Kamsa is up to he's a no goodnik. All right? He's up to no good, but he knows perfectly well what he is doing. Therefore, when Bar Kamsa brought the animal to the temple, the priests would not sacrifice it on the altar since it was blemished. But they also could not explain this satisfactorily to the Gentile authorities who did not consider it to be blemished. They're in a pickle here. The king sent a sacrifice. Bar Kamsa caused a blemish to be the sacrifice on purpose, knowing that this is what was going to come down. Right? He is inflaming an already on fire situation. Now, okay. So the name of this priest who the sacrifice is brought to is Zechariah. All right? He knows what's going on. What is his predicament?
Well,
Or is there no predicament for him?
Well, if he sacrifices it, then the
Right.
Jews will be upset. If he doesn't sacrifice the animal, then the emperor would be upset.
Anybody want to state that, flesh that out? Yes, Dan. What's at stake here? I made a pun. My friend Elise Sider Joseph likes to say there's a steak in the world to come, S-T-E-A-K, because she likes to eat flesh. Yeah. So, somebody say something?
Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
it's something that the emperor gave him. They have to do what they have to do. Otherwise, they will be in real trouble.
Oh boy, yeah, you're absolutely right. So put yours together what Dan said, and we got a hell of a situation here. All right. Now, I don't know if you remember the little thing I skipped over at the beginning, but in yet another commentary on this section, there's a question that asks, who is wise? And the answer is one who sees the nolad. Now, the nolad is like something that's it's a baby in utero, It's something that's yet to be born. So think of that for our purposes as an idea or an understanding of something. Or you're going to see here that the ability to use what we already know to make decisions now, keeping in mind the possible ramifications in the future. Right? So all of those things go into our thought process. So who is wise? It doesn't say the one who sees the future to come. We use the language of Nolad from King Solomon, who said, "The lazy man says as the lion in the street, I shall be killed if I step outside. For these are the words of the lazy one who buries his hands in the bowl and is afraid of things which never happened and never existed." So there are people who just are constantly worried about things and they make things up in order so that they should be worried. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Oh, that's another pun. Sometimes I just surprise myself. Alrighty? So that's the lazy person. The wise person is a person who understands the unfolding of events and sees in front of herself or himself all of the myriad of choices that one could make that are the best choices and not perhaps the obvious choices or the only choice. But as we're about to see, Rabbi Zechariah thinks he only has one choice. Why? Halacha. Let's continue. Therefore, it doesn't say who is wise, the one who sees the future, because any foolish and anxious, lazy person will worry about many vanities. But the wise one is to whom something happened in the past, and from these he judges with his intellect what will potentially happen in the future. That is the wise one. I think I just said that. In other words, therefore, we learn in our Mishnah, who is wise, the one who sees the nolad, that was already born, that which already happened in early days, and from similar events, they see what will be born in the future from that which is happening now, yada, 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 which is to say the nolad includes both the past and the future. Okay, that which is again, I'm losing a word. A baby in utero is not infiltrated. It's when all of those cells are growing. Okay, never mind. All right, back to our story. And therefore, one should not find guilt in Rabbi Zechariah ben Afkolis. So why would we find guilt in Rabbi Zechariah in not accepting the animal with the blemish? What is he guilty of? Yeah, Bina.
Can I make a distinction here? So if they're trying to please the king, who is not Jewish, this is not a spiritual sacrifice. This is a sacrifice that's about taxing or something.
I don't think they would relate to it in that way.
Really?
The rabbis, yeah, the rabbis have one job, which is to fulfill a certain obligation that they have within the sacrificial system to fulfill, whether this is a sacrifice for a goodwill offering or a sin offering, right? And various other kinds of sacrifices. They're not thinking, oh, the Romans are bringing a sacrifice. We'll throw it in the fire and we'll all eat and have a great barbecue. And remember, they're going to eat from that too. So that animal is not really kasher because it had a blemish.
Okay. I'm just trying to understand, because it just doesn't seem that it would be a Jewish spiritual activity if
To take somebody else. Well, since they're already accepting them, right? They must be accepting them for the same reasons that they accept them from Jews, right? And the Romans, they've got things on their mind, and things they want to, be forgiven for. And they know what this place is. It's a portal to the divine. Send it up in smoke, and I'm forgiven. Susan?
Okay.
Since we don't we're not involved with doing sacrifices like this today.
Yeah.
I don't really understand what all this stuff about the sacrifice is, and the whole story is completely, it's just kind of unraveling for me because I don't really understand what's the power and point of sacrifices for us now anyway, and what's the point of all this? At the beginning, it was clear, but now it's gotten so messed up with all the sacrifice stuff, and I don't even understand what a sacrifice really is. We don't do sacrifices.
I don't know why that started. It's a good question, Susan. I hope that when we wrap this up, why did that come up? Okay. You know, I've got so many toys here. Sometimes I hit the wrong button. Oh, I know what happened. Chain. I'm chained like a fool. Hopefully, I will be able to bring this all to a chatima to answer that question of what's love got to do with it. Devorah, do you have? I want to make sure that we finish the story. Can you hold on to your question, or is it pertinent to this moment? That I don't want you to lose it either. Your comment.
Well, all I want to say is that his job is to uphold his responsibility, which is to keep the sacrifices, I think, to keep the sacrifices pure and to do what he is supposed to do. Because it's like he has a choice at this point. He either allows an unpure sacrifice, which changes, then it opens the door for that in the future. Or, and so if he lets it happen, he's trying to appease the emperor, but that's not a guarantee. And he's now opening the door for that for the future, and that can change the whole process of what their job is.
Yes, that is very true. That is very true.
Really,
but maybe that is the problem.
Yeah, so how do you choose?
Well, what does happen after the second temple is destroyed, or even before then, Rabbi Yochanan, right, Ben Zakkai, he leaves and he makes his way to Yavna because I suspect he cannot deal with the likes of Rabbi Zachariah, who is so tethered to the halacha that he can't make a decision based on the greater good of what's happening right here in front of his eyes. And may I also put in that I was listening to some commentary about this, is that it would not have been out of the question for the non-Jewish authorities to understand the sages arranging for Bar Kamtza to be killed as an informant. This is time of war, right? An informant against against a body, which basically, you know, the sages were. A terrible, terrible thing. They might have been justified. So here we have, and let's add that to the equation because I like to throw fuel on the fire. We could kill Bar Kamtza. We're not going to do that. We could sacrifice the animal. We're not going to do that. So Rabbi Zachariah is caught between a rock and a hard place, right? By not killing him, but what's going to happen? We're going to let the Romans think that we're rebelling, but we're not really rebelling. And then, as a postscript to the whole story, sometimes it's right to not be cautious. Sometimes you got to go on a limb. Be bold. Take a chance. What we have here is a failure to protest that runs all the way through the story. We have a structure of the rabbis in the sacrificial system they don't want to let go of. They got it pretty good. This is all they do. Right? It's not like, Rashi, who was a vintner, or Rambam, who later on, of course, this is centuries later, who's a doctor. Let's look back at the text here. Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkalos We should not find him guilty. Why? Because until this moment, nothing like this had ever been heard of. That such a small thing would embitter a Jewish person's heart to the extent that they'd hand over the temple and all of Israel into the hands of non-Jewish oppressors. And the Rabbi Zechariah had no reason to worry about this. That's not going to happen. This is not a big deal. Right? That's the last part. So who's the villain, if there is a villain, of this story? I think we have a number of possibilities. Rabbi Zechariah, who could have made a bold decision. The sages at the feast, who could have stood up and said something instead of being bystanders. Or Bar Kamsa. Again, remember that this is the last straw for Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who wants to create some legal reform, right? And that leads, of course, to the rabbinic tradition. We go from biblical Judaism to rabbinic Judaism because of the destruction of the Second Temple, right? They get out of Dodge, and they are pioneers in the creation of a new Judaism. And so to say that Judaism has not changed in 4,000 years, you never believe that one's look. So the question is about who's culpable, right? And what's wrong with the system that needs to change, but those who are in power are invested in the system. Is there anybody that's made a good decision in this story? Should the other guests beside the sages have done something? And if yes, what might they have done? What are the dangers of Reb Zechariah's approach? And as I mentioned in the beginning, why would this be a story that the rabbis told about themselves, a cautionary tale of where things could lead, right? You know, this is a story that could be an illustration of why, you know, the Rebbes of that Reb Zalman of blessed memory so admired, and they were his teachers. They literally threw him out of the academy, meaning that, you know, he was looked at as a traitor, as Bar Kamsa, right? They asked him to leave. They ignored him, right? And Reb Zalman was bold in his approach, in a way that Rabbi Zechariah was not, in the way that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was. So all of this story leads to the destruction of the Second Temple. Well, yes, no, I don't think it matters what the answer to that question is. I think what matters is how we take responsibility as each of the characters at every place, ourselves, when we face these same kinds of situations of power and authority and speaking truth to power. There's a lot that can be said of how we can use this kind of story to teach the role of the bystander. I mean, there's so many different things here. Sinat chinam, baseless hatred, right? Because we can't talk to each other. You know, we get polarized. That's certainly, you know, Dan, before when you said maybe everybody there hated him. Well, maybe he, Bar Kamsa, represents a whole different sect of people. You right? Maybe Bar Kamsa is a follower of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. I don't know. You know, I'm just, you know, playing here. But to use I think that was a really interesting idea, a comment that you had, Dan, that maybe there's two factions here that are at war with each other.
It really reminds me.
Go Dan, then Mary Rita, and then Bina.
I mean, to some extent, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like a story similar to Jesus, where there's, you know, somebody who is hated by the powers that be, and gets and threatened to be turned over to the authorities, and the authorities then turn against. I mean, it sounds like a variation of the story of Jesus, and that so. I mean, not to repeat the whole story, but I just wonder when this was written, who wrote it, and it's about the right time if you're talking about the destruction of the temple and when Jesus lived, and then the Romans got so pissed off with the Jews that they destroyed the place. Was it because of what was done to Jesus, what Jesus did or didn't do?
Yeah, interesting. And we don't know when it was written. The Gemara, the Talmud is not codified, Mishnah and Gemara, until like around 500. Between the end of the Second Temple, that's the year 70. That is Jesus's time,
Right.
right?
N-
Yeah, yeah, Mary Rita.
Not really. Jesus was probably dead by the 30s, and the disciples and Paul and would have been like forming little Christian communities, not just in Jerusalem, but elsewhere. It feels like people are in like their own little silos. I'm thinking, don't they know what will happen if, they turn down this emperor? Like where's the match gonna, land? Where's the fuel that, one little match, um, it feels like there might be um two factions with the Jews, but then there's the Romans, and there could also then be the Christians, and Jews that don't know what to do, and with these Christians that are, it's really, really interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
And then, all of a sudden, the consequence, then there's a war all of a sudden at the end. I'm thinking,
Yeah, so we don't know when it was written, and it could be a cautionary tale the rabbis write for themselves. I wouldn't discount the possibility, Dan, of your comment. We just don't know. And, if this is the temple is destroyed in the year 70, Jesus dies around, 35? And the story is written sometime after, this, I said before, it could be a polemic against certain ideas, and to self-protect and pull the wagons, to circle the wagons around what has been established so that we don't lose what we have. Bina, bring us home, and then we'll say goodnight.
Okay, well, it just seems like a story that's about how to start a war. I mean, I could put all the characters from the news right in this story,
Right.
and it's going on right now. It's also fascinating to me that it isn't so much about the broad actions. Wars start, forgive my sexism here, when men, usually men, get pissed off and embarrassed and rejected and don't process it. And it grows and it grows. I mean, women have talked to me about this, so that's why I'm being such a sexist. I apologize. But anyway, it has so much to do with the feelings first, and then these big things happen. I wish we had learned these lessons.
Me too. And I have to say, Bina, I resemble that remark. Susan, was that any help to kind of like tie up any loose ends about what this story has to do with the destruction of the Second Temple, and how we through modern eyes can
Not too much, too much stuff involved, too many chords,
too many moving parts. Okay, I would encourage you to to open up that page in the Talmud, just read the story, and then Google a commentary on it, and maybe there's a better articulation that I was able to muster this evening. But that said, thank you all for coming. I've realized I've missed teaching all these weeks. By the way, there will be no teaching for the next 2 weeks, and we will resume at the end of last Wednesday night In August, DDK is going to be offering a teaching on forgiveness, which leads us right into Elul. And then each of the weeks of Elul is going to be a different teacher with a different midah or midot offering musar. For those of you who have or don't have a musar practice, hopefully it'll get something started here, and maybe, who knows, maybe a Moshe Musar group might arise from it. So stay tuned. Alrighty, wherever you may be, I hope you stay safe. It's raining here already. I think it's supposed to rain for the next few days, but God willing, it won't be with the same kinds of flooding that various other areas of the country are having. So everybody stay safe. And thank you. We had a minyan yet again. Anybody saying Kaddish? We could say Kaddish. Elizabeth, you have the text? Do you need it?
I think I know it.
Okay.
Uh,
You want to name who you? I can pull it up real quickly and screen share. You want to name who you're saying Kaddish for?
my brother, the fifth yahrzeit for my brother, David and Yona.
Okay. Here you go. Yit Gadal, Shemei Rabbah. Amen. V'chaye d'chol Beit Yisrael, b'gala u'vizman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam ol'almei olmayam. V'yitadar, v'yitaleh, v'yitalal. Shemei d'kudsha b'richu. Le'ila min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbachata v'nechamata. Damiran bi'alma v'yimru amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba min Shemaya.